Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Stephanie. You have found the Dark Oak. In today's episode, we explore what the National Center for Missing Exploited Children has called the greatest unsolved mystery of the missing. This is the missing case of Marjorie West.
Welcome to the Dark Oak, the mystery podcast with purpose. Each month through our charity called the Branch of Hope Foundation, we give a portion of earnings from our Patreon and our sponsors to a nonprofit organization related to the first episode of the month. To find out how you can be a part of the movement, head over to thedarkoak.com or stay with us until the end of the episode and we will give you all of the details.
Well, this is an afternoon recording, and you never know what you're going to get with the two of us. I can't say I'm a morning person, and really, I'm not even an evening person. I'm just something in the middle. I don't know what that makes me.
Are you even a person, Stephanie?
I actually saw a meme the other day. It said, I'm not an early bird. I'm not a night owl. I'm some kind of perpetually tired pigeon. I feel like that might be me.
It kind of does sound appropriate.
So here we are. It's almost after 6 p.m. Who knows what's going to come out of our mouths here. So you know what? Proud of us, though.
Me too.
Look at us, just making it happen.
We are making it work. And you, dear listeners, wow. I can just tell you now, you're in for a treat.
In for a treat.
Anything is possible.
Running on adrenaline. It's only after 6 p.m.
I mean, by now, I'm normally like trying to wind down, but we're going strong. We still have another episode to record even after this one. So
there will be wine between those two, though. So we'll see what's going to happen.
Those listeners will be extra lucky.
Extra. But you heard me with my teaser and you even made a face.
I did. I don't know that I'm familiar with this case, but I am intrigued.
A historic case. So both the Guardian, so this is in 2018, both the Guardian and the National Center for the Missing and Exploited Children called this disappearance, quote, the greatest unsolved mystery of the missing. Like, that's a big deal.
That's like bold. It's a bold claim.
It's a bold claim. It is a historic case, as I said, so it's going to take us back to 1938. And I know not everyone loves historic cases, but I do. So I get to pick them. And it's an interesting one.
It's your podcast. You do what you want, Stephanie.
You guys are going to love it. You're going to love it.
Yeah, we are.
You're going to like it. Now, this case has all the things. It's baffling, it's challenging, it's hard because it does involve a child, but it's still surrounded by a bunch of question marks. We're almost 100 years after, well, not quite, we're like 90 years after the fact, and there's still a lot of unknowns in this case. So I think it's one that we should explore.
Well, the fact that we haven't forgotten about it nearly 100 years later, yeah, there must be something about it that really just stands out.
Yeah.
That we're still talking about it.
Right. And I've seen it printed both ways, but this is either the second or the third oldest unsolved child abduction case recorded in American history.
Wow.
So definitely some relevance.
Sure.
Again, as I said, this is about a little 4-year-old. Her name is Marjorie West. The search for her was one of the largest for a child since the Lindbergh baby kidnapping 6 years earlier. So that kind of gives you an idea of where we are in history as far as concern about child safety, because for a long time that really wasn't that big of a concern, because this is before the Adam Walsh, before pretty high profile child abduction cases.
Right, but we're also on the outskirts of that really huge, tragic.
Exactly.
Case.
You can kind of see this like slowly ramping up to where we have the formation of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, because that wasn't formed yet. But the public is getting reminded that child abductions do happen. Right. So we're slowly kind of working our way into that reality where, I mean, it's always happened, since the beginning of time.
Sure.
But it wasn't publicized. It wasn't in your face all the time. It wasn't something that parents were concerned about.
Right.
or constantly thinking about, like we do now.
Right.
I mean, everything you do, you're making sure, that your children are safe. Who are they with? Where are they going? How do we know that they're getting from point A to point B safely? And at the same time, trying not to be, a helicopter mom, because they've shown that that's not positive either. So it's this like delicate balance that each of us are trying to find in ourselves and with our kids on how to keep them safe. But this is one of the landmark cases that really kind of got parents thinking about, okay, how am I supervising my children?
Okay. I'm really interested to hear about this.
So Marjorie was the daughter of Shirley and Cecilia West, and absolutely adorable. There are pictures of her online. She had bouncy red curls. She had beautiful blue eyes and a little freckle face.
Oh, no.
I know. On Sunday, May 8th, 1938, the West family, including Marjorie, her father, Shirley, her mother, Cecilia, and her older siblings, Dorothea, who was aged 11, and Alan, aged 7, attended church at Bradford, Pennsylvania. After church, they drove 13 miles along Highway 219 to a clearing in the Allegheny Forest to join family friends, Mr. and Mrs. Lloyd Akerland. And the two families planned to enjoy the park and have a picnic because it happened to be Mother's Day, which make this even more tragic.
Oh, no. Okay.
About 3 p.m., Marjorie's mother, Cecilia, headed to the road to rest in the car, while her father, Shirley, prepared to go trout fishing with his friend Lloyd and son Alan. And the girls, Dorothea and Marjorie, decided to pick wildflowers for their mother. Shirley, Marjorie's father, warned both girls to watch out for rattlesnakes that could be around this large boulder that was next to them, but otherwise said, have fun. We're out here in the forest. We're having a beautiful day. What could go wrong? Now, after the girls gathered their little bouquet of violets, Dorothea headed to the car to deliver her little fistful of flowers to her mother. And after only a few moments, she returned to where the girls had been picking flowers, but Marjorie was gone.
Oh.
Now, Shirley, Lloyd, and Alan immediately began searching the area for Marjorie as soon as Dorothea said, I can't find my sister. But there was literally no sign of Marjorie. Now, the Allegheny National Forest is still very much a popular destination for nature lovers to this day. And just like it is now, the forest is very vast. It's one of those, like, if you're not sure where you're going, you could easily lose your sense of direction. And unfortunately, in the same regard, if you're trying to find someone and you're not sure where to look, very difficult to find anyone. So they were really already kind of fighting an uphill battle. And after being unable to locate Marjorie, the West family made the difficult decision to leave the park and drive to the nearest phone, which was 7 miles away.
Oh.
This is the point in the story. I mean, there are several in this story, but I find that this moment would have just been a gut punch.
Anytime I hear of a family arrive at a place with all of their children and have to leave without one is just, it's just heart-wrenching. So yeah, this is awful.
But what choice do you have?
You don't. Yeah. I mean, I guess some of them could have stayed behind to continue looking, but there may have been reasons why they chose to all go.
Well, their family friends did stay.
Okay.
Just in case something happened, but they took their other children
To
understandably,
safety.
yeah,
Sure.
to go make the phone call.
Oh, man.
When they did arrive at the phone, they were able to make contact with the police in the town of Kane. By this time, though, valuable hours had begun to pass by because it was 3 o'clock when she had disappeared. So we don't have that much more daylight in order to search for her. However, a massive manhunt was soon underway. It would see more than 3,000 local people volunteering to search for Marjorie. Now, when police failed to find Marjorie that very Sunday afternoon, 200 men joined in that next day, including the Citizens Conservation Corps and the Moose and Elks Lodges. And local miners also offered their lanterns and headlamps to aid in the search in the wee hours. The amount of community support to find this little girl is incredible. And this is one of those things, Mr. Rogers, Mr. Rogers, he always
Sure.
says, find the helpers.
Find the helpers.
And this story to me, as tragic as it is that little Marjorie is missing, the helpers were everywhere in the story. And it kept me going because some of these, they just get so heavy, but so many people were the helpers in the story. And so this is an example of it. Men that did not know Marjorie came out of the woodwork, and these amazing miners lending their headlamps.
That's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Unfortunately, Marjorie was still not found on that Monday. So the following day, the search party grew to 500. They checked streams, they checked old mines, they checked caves, they checked wells. Also on that Tuesday, the police brought bloodhounds from New York State. And here's one of the places that I did find a little conflicting information. And again, this is a 90-year-old story, so there's bound to be a little bit of that. So 2 newspaper articles said the dogs, these bloodhounds, followed Marjorie's trail, quote, half a mile up a mountain, end quote, to a cabin with its door nailed shut, which is suspicious, right? However, they did go into this cabin and there was nothing of interest to be found inside. So this was kind of a totally dead end. It is curious that the newspaper wrote about it, though. Other media accounts, as well as those of Marjorie's descendants and online blogs and discussion threads and stuff, more current things, say the dogs followed Marjorie's scent to the road alongside the clearing.
Which would make a little more sense, in my opinion, for a 4-year-old to make it up a mountain would be difficult.
Half a mile up a mountain, again, to a cabin where there was no sign of her and the door was nailed shut.
Right.
There was nobody around. So,
but that's definitely more nefarious sounding.
Well,
maybe.
Well, yeah, either way, it's not real great. But it seems to me the more likely scenario is that the dogs tracked her to the roadside. Okay, just prepared to have your heart broken in tiny little chunks through this whole story. The dog searches found the crushed bouquet of violets that Marjorie had picked for her mother for Mother's Day, lying on the ground not far from the road.
The fact that she made it to the road seems like it could have been a good thing, but then there's no sign of her, which is scary.
Yeah. Exactly. Wednesday afternoon, Bradford's mayor, Hugh Ryan, issued his plea for 1,000 volunteers for the next day's search. They are really doing everything that they can.
Well, and they're running out of time.
She's only 4. So he made a plea for 1,000 volunteers. He got 2,500.
Okay. I wasn't prepared to cry, and I'm already teared up 3 times now.
I'm telling you, this story is about the helpers. I mean, it just overwhelming support for this family. So that next Thursday morning, with hundreds of workers from the Western Pennsylvania oil fields who were given the day off to look for Marjorie. I know. This is why the story is American. It is tragedy. It is absolute tragedy. But talking about people coming together, for good.
Good people. It's a reminder, which I think we need right now.
Yeah.
There are, and have always been, a lot of really good people.
Absolutely. So these hundreds of workers given the day off.
Wow.
To go look for this little girl. They walked along police with bloodhounds, veterans of the First World War, corn planter Indians. So these were Native Americans known as the corn planters. They all came out to help track.
Wow.
For Marjorie, coal miners, and assorted others who responded to the mayor's call.
Wow.
The search was praised for its organization, thanks in part to the men who, like Marjorie's father, Shirley, had served in the Great War. They knew what they were doing.
Right.
They weren't novices, and they weren't strangers to hard work and getting in and getting it done. At 5:30 a.m., surveyors mapped out the land, and by 8 a.m., a, quote, line of men standing shoulder to shoulder several miles long grew impatient in the Chapel Ford Road until leaders gave the bugle signal for them to enter the forest.
It's hard to find words. I can picture that.
Yeah. The
Quite something.
The Bradford era newspaper wrote, quote, refinery workers rubbed elbows with professional men. Women doled out 1,600 cups of coffee prepared in wash boilers for hot laundry. This was a whole community there.
Mm-hmm.
The search team walked through the Allegheny forest at arm's length in a mile-long line as they killed rattlesnakes and were careful not to drop down into one of the hundreds of oil wells dug during the area's petroleum boom in 1870s.
Oh, no.
So this has been the oil wells are interesting to me. They are mentioned many times in these articles. I don't know a ton about how big they were in that area. So they've mentioned men made sure not to accidentally like step in them, but I don't know if they would have been large enough for like a 4-year-old to disappear into.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
So maybe enough for someone to get pretty badly injured, not necessarily disappear.
So I think these were more like exploratory holes.
Okay.
If you will.
Okay, good, because that made my heart sink.
Well, because there has been some insinuation that she might have gotten like trapped in one, but none of them seem like they're like these gaping holes that could like swallow her up. It's more like a gopher hole or something like that your foot gets stuck in that could cause injury. But they mentioned several times during the search people having to be very careful to not step in these oil holes, but no one seemed concerned that Marjorie might be in one. Gotcha. So that's my takeaway.
Okay, that makes sense.
At the end of Thursday, even after this massive manhunt, though, Marjorie was not found. At the end of that day, the Bradford era newspaper reported on the defeat and described the, quote, haggard, sleep-robbed faces of scores of men that came back without little 4-year-old Marjorie.
Oh.
By the end of the week, the search covered 35 square miles with Marjorie still out of sight. There were discoveries, however. A swath of lace near the boulder where Marjorie and her older sister had been picking flowers, and a fresh hole a few miles away. Unfortunately, these clues would prove to be useless because Marjorie had not been wearing lace that day, and the hole, which some thought might be signs of a shallow grave, was found to be made by 2 men who were using the hole to hide caskets of cherry wine. So, not incredibly useful. Additional efforts were made by the Native Americans in the area to track she-bears, or sows, so mother bears that many believe could have been prone to carry off young children. And honestly, I cannot believe in our year of podcasting how often we have discussed wildlife carrying off children. We've got Casey Hathaway with the bear, and then we've got Lindy Chamberlain with her daughter, and you know,
it's a reoccurring theme here at the Dark Oak.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I was prepared when I was growing up. Like, I was prepared for quicksand, but I wasn't prepared for wildlife carrying off my children. So apparently this is a thing I actually need to be concerned about.
Great. Let me add it to the list. Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah, but this was a real thought. And so these bears were tracked to see if they could have possibly snatched up little Marjorie.
And when you say a she-bear, so of course me and my romantic brain went to, oh, like a mother bear who thinks it's a little cub. But no, probably more so like a hungry mother bear who wants to feed her babies.
I think either.
Okay.
I think the hope was that this bear had taken her in. I think almost 100 years ago, I think there was much more of a romantic notion of the bear taking it in to mother it.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we do know from those historic cases, a lot of children got taken by bears and,
right,
you know, not for the better. But I think the hope, again, was that they would find Marjorie alive and that it was somehow in a mother bear's den.
Okay.
Along with her cubs.
Okay. Well, that's what I hope.
I mean, that's the hope. Of course, the opposite could be true too. And I guess the idea is if they followed these bears, they would find some evidence.
Okay, gotcha. Either way, they thought maybe they might find something.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Exactly. But it never amounted to anything. Engineers pumped out a few muddy wells, but truly after that, there was not much more left to search. If she was still in the forest somewhere, it had simply swallowed her up.
Which a 4-year-old in the forest It's very possible. I mean, an animal, any type of forest animal could have carried her off, or, she could have fallen in a hole. She could have gotten covered up by brush if there was like a stream or a body of water. You know what I mean? It is not unheard of that despite all of this searching, she may never be found if she got lost in that forest, in my opinion.
It's very possible. And there are some that think she never made it out of the forest. The thing that points that away for me is the dog trail that led to the road.
There's that, which leads to a whole new set of worries. Quite
Exactly.
frankly.
Yeah. On Friday evening, so again, she disappeared on Sunday. So this is Friday evening. The state police commissioner, P.W. Foote, told the Associated Press that Marjorie's disappearance probably began with her playing hide and seek. And, okay, get your tissues ready. Another one. Another one here. The hits keep coming. Marjorie's father, Shirley, did not leave the forest for the entire week. According to the Bradford Era, on May 16th, a full 8 days after his daughter disappeared, he finally, quote, consented to come to Bradford, ate his evening meal at home, and then returned. Like, pain and devastation. That's all I see. It's just pain and devastation. Marjorie's mother, Cecilia, stayed home so they wouldn't miss any phone calls. Because, again, we're in the landline era. Police began circulating a poster describing Marjorie's curly red hair, freckles, and the outfit she was last seen in, consisting of a red Shirley Temple-style hat, a blue coat, a blue dress, and patent leather shoes. During the week of searches, police also interviewed motorists across an area spanning 300 square miles.
Wow.
They were serious about this. And many people believed at the time, as I kind of do now, that Marjorie was most likely picked up at the road by someone. And in terms of motorists that passed through the area that day, there were only 3 cars that passed through around 3 p.m.
Okay, so this should be easy to solve, Stephanie.
It should be. The drivers of 2 of the vehicles were identified by that Tuesday night. The third, however, who witnesses said was male, was seen speeding in his Plymouth sedan so fast that an oncoming vehicle had to pull into a ditch. Because Marjorie's disappearance received a great deal of publicity across the nation, a taxi driver in Thomas, West Virginia, claimed that he saw a girl riding in a dark green sedan with an unidentified man in his 30s. He said the girl was crying and was wearing similar clothes to the ones described by police. Now, this sighting took place at 11:38 p.m. on the night of her disappearance, and this timeline is important. So remember, she disappeared at 3, and she was seen in Thomas, West Virginia at 11:38. Incredibly, the taxi driver said the driver of the sedan asked him where the nearest motel was located, so he actually had an interaction with this man. The taxi driver directed him to an establishment across the street, and the unidentified driver left the little girl in the sedan, who he described as his daughter, and went inside the motel. He came out shortly saying that there were no vacancies. The unidentified man then asked the taxi driver about a local liquor store, and the taxi driver told him to stop at a local bar down the road. Now, having seen the flyers several days later, the taxi driver identified Marjorie as the man's passenger.
Oh, man.
A man matching the description of the unidentified individual also refueled at a gas station outside of Thomas, and the attendant reported seeing a bundle wrapped in a gray blanket in the back seat of the car.
So it could be her sleeping.
Now, there was a lot of interest in this particular sighting, right?
Sure.
Because it's kind of all we have to go on
Well,
right
yeah,
now,
first
right?
of all, it's all we've got.
It's all we've got. And it's important because investigators determined that the approximate travel time along U.S. Route 219 between Wright Gravel, where Marjorie disappeared, and Thomas, West Virginia, was 8 hours.
So it lined up with the timeline.
Exactly. So if the individual abducted Marjorie around 3, they would have arrived in Thomas at 11:30 that evening.
Ooh, man, this is a lot of like circumstantial.
Exactly. Now, it has widely been reported that authorities were never able to confirm the identity of the man or the child. However, on May 12, 1938, the Hutchinson News quoted City of Bradford Police Chief Edward Edmonds as saying that this theory was discounted as the West Virginia State Police identified the driver of the sedan as Conrad Fredley, a merchant who was returning home from a sales trip that night with his little girl, Louise, age 6. They were both tired and they stopped at a hotel until the fog lifted. The police met Friendly and his daughter and were satisfied that she was not Marjorie, although she did resemble the missing girl. The Wests, Marjorie's parents, even traveled to meet Conrad and his daughter as well to see for their own eyes.
So we know that at least Conrad did not have Marjorie.
Right. And again, according to eyewitnesses, all 3 vehicles that passed through there now have been accounted for. So what happened to Marjorie?
So we 100% believe that Conrad was the passing through.
Investigators at the time believe that would have been him. He did fit the description and he would have been passing through at the same time.
Well, then what happened to Marjorie?
What happened to Marjorie?
So to me, if all that we've heard so far is accurate, no mistakes have been made, we haven't missed a vehicle or misidentified anyone, to me, she's still in that forest.
It's very possible. Now, again, remember, there wasn't a great deal of accuracy in reporting that this driver had been identified. So rumors started going crazy with the theory that Marjorie had been picked up in this sedan and was possibly being taken to a woman named Georgia Tan. Does that name ring a bell to you?
Wait a minute. Georgia Tan. Did we talk about her in the Sauter family disappearances?
We did. Georgia Tan was a woman based in Tennessee who notoriously sold children to wealthy families for, quote, adoption.
Right. And if I remember correctly, mean, abusive woman who, if she couldn't sell you, she would use you.
Children became a money-making machine for her.
Oh, so wait a minute. This is just a popular theory?
It's a popular theory. Say she had been picked up by someone. And again, the idea is it could have been Conrad before Conrad had been identified.
Okay.
That maybe he was taking her to Georgia Tan. But what if there was a car that no one saw and she got picked up?
Well, so my question is, who is saying there were only 3 cars that went by? Like, where are we getting that information? This is before we had, surveillance cameras.
Oh, it's from the family. I mean,
so
that's all they
it's
know.
Just the family. Okay.
Right.
3 cars passed by while we were here.
Right.
Okay. I don't know what to do with that, but okay.
Georgia Tan, to give you a few more details, she ran the Tennessee Children's Home Society near Memphis, Tennessee. And initially, the home was lauded for placing at-risk children into adoptive homes. However, authorities eventually learned that Georgia Tan had kidnapped over 1,200 young children between the years of 1932 and 1951. And the majority of victims were abducted from states bordering Tennessee, although some children resided in Connecticut. For whatever reason, she had a string of kids that she collected from Connecticut. And there was also like an inside job part to it where she had kind of connections with a judge that would approve her custody bids, like in court. Like she would say, oh, I'll take this at-risk youth. And the judge would always grant her the ability to take in those children. It's just horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
No, she was a monster. Yeah,
a monster. Yeah. She placed most of the children with childless couples that were in New York City and Los Angeles that were willing to pay a pretty penny for these children. And it just awful. Like you said, just a monster. I've read several books about her baby ring, and it is absolutely despicable. Families broken up, children stolen from their families. But as it pertains to Marjorie's case, it's pretty unlikely that she was involved in Georgia Tan's baby ring, mostly based on her location. There's not a lot in Pennsylvania. I mean, certainly Georgia Tan collected children from all over the place, but that, and again, no additional vehicle that hasn't been accounted for was seen, but maybe there was another one there. It's just a theory.
Right. When we don't have a whole lot, and we don't, we've searched the forest, we can't find her there. Dog trail led us to the road, but we've talked to all of the drivers. Now, I would wonder if could there have been an accident? And then, I don't know, maybe somebody was afraid they were going to get in trouble, so they hid her after the fact.
It's like you've read my case.
Okay. All right. I will.
There's another theory.
Oh, okay.
There's
I will
another
wait. I will
theory.
wait for you to tell me more.
There was plenty of other speculation about what happened to Marjorie. Some believe she was taken to Canada by other family members, but I'm not sure who they would be. They've never been identified. Some believe she was still in the woods, as you and I have talked about. Possibly in one of these oil wells, possibly in a pond.
So far, that's kind of where my mind's going to. I mean, that seems the more likely scenario than being picked up by one of the 3 vehicles who have all been identified.
Yeah. And this one is really disturbing. Many remembered the tragic loss of 2 young boys who had disappeared without a trace 28 years earlier from nearby towns. On April 26 of 1910, both of these boys were out with groups of friends 13 miles apart in the Allegheny Forest, fishing and having fun. One group of boys was just 11 miles from where Marjorie vanished. I had heard of these disappearances of these boys, but really looking into it is truly terrifying. So one of these groups of boys, again 11 miles from where Marjorie had vanished, saw what they said was a wild man and started running. When they looked back, their friend, 9-year-old Edward Paul Adams, had disappeared.
Ooh.
Just disappeared without a trace.
Oh, I have chills.
And another boy, 7-year-old Michael Stefan, who was also in a group of friends, met the same fate, and he was only 19 miles away from White Gravel, where Marjorie disappeared. And he was just out fishing with his friends, and then they turned around and he was gone. Both boys disappeared on the exact same day, miles from each other in the Allegheny Forest, 28 years earlier. No trace of either boy has ever been found.
Okay, so this could be one of several things. Either there's some weird wild man snatching up kids, or...
But a 28-year separation, is it likely to be the same thing?
Right.
But I can see how people would say,
Put
oh my
together.
gosh, like,
Right.
what about those 2 other boys that disappeared?
What is probably more probable is that it's just a dangerous place for little kids.
It's possible.
I mean, it's a forest.
It's a forest.
I mean, when I imagine a forest, I'm assuming where the family was picnicking was probably a clear place, but you're probably only feet away from woods.
Yeah. Now, it's suspected that one or both of these boys were victim of a serial killer named J. Frank Hickey.
Oh, so there really was a wild man.
There really was a wild man.
Mm-mm.
And again, maybe it was just their imagination that day, but Hickey was active in that area during the time, and he was known to travel by train in that area. However, as it pertains to Marjorie's case, Hickey was apprehended in 1912, and he died still in prison in 1922. So it was definitely not Hickey, but it didn't stop some from speculating that it could have been like Frank Hickey 2.0. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like another kind of serial killer, child molester that was like squatting in the woods.
Right. Which, what are the odds that the spot they choose to have their picnic is the same spot where this either madman is or baby snatcher is driving by? I mean, the odds are crazy, but I guess that kind of stuff happens all the time.
More than we like to think.
Yeah.
And truly, the odds of being abducted by a stranger are astronomically low compared to how much we hear about it.
Sure.
The odds of being taken by custodial or non-custodial parent are much higher.
Sure.
Than being taken by stranger abductions, very, very rare. But in some of these cases, what else could it be?
Right.
What else could it be? So 4 dedicated officers worked this case for 5 months. 5 months. And unfortunately, the trail still grew cold. Marjorie's father, Shirley, continued to search the woods well past the conclusion of the official search.
Of course he did.
And on Marjorie's 5th birthday in June of 1938, her mother Cecilia made a plea through the press. Quote, "If someone took Marjorie, could that person please send her into a pharmacy with a note?" Heartbreak. Now, the family has always held to the belief that Marjorie was taken from the woods and was living under a new given name. They felt this in their hearts. They felt like she was not deceased. They felt like she had been picked up and taken. And I don't know if that's because that's easier to believe, but they really felt that she is still out there. And even now, many descendants are still talking about the fact that she could still be out there and she could still be alive. And so they continued to keep the story as alive as they could so that one day she may reach back out to the family. This is an interesting part. In the late 90s, a local professor and writer named Harold Bud Beck conducted research on Marjorie's case. Over the years, he had heard many locals tell stories of the lost girl, and he became committed to finding her. He decided to use the power of the newly available internet to aid in his search. He first started by trying to capture an age progression photo of Marjorie. Technology was not then what it is now.
They don't have the AI that we have.
They don't have the AI where they just speak it into existence.
Right.
But he realized that in baby photos, Marjorie and her older sister Dorothea looked strikingly similar. So he figured that he could post a picture of baby Marjorie next to a photo of adult Dorothea, and people would be able to kind of see similarities. So her face, so Dorothea's face, became kind of the age progression for Marjorie.
Okay, so, I mean, that makes sense.
Right? So with Dorothea's permission, he posted these photos. He also posted a $10,000 reward for information about Marjorie. And then he started giving interviews and following up on tips. One tip grabbed his attention immediately. He was contacted by a woman who said she worked closely with a nurse who resembled the up-to-date picture of Dorothea. Beck traveled to meet this nurse, and upon seeing her, he agreed that she looked very similar to Dorothea. Yet this woman denied being Marjorie, and that was essentially the end of the lead at that point in time. However, around 2005, Beck said the nurse contacted him saying she had news to share. He agreed to meet her at her childhood farm in North Carolina. According to Beck, the woman said her mother, nearing the end of her life, told her an almost unbelievable story. I know, Cynthia's got her fingers crossed right now. She said in 1938, her father left their farm and drove north to work in Bradford's refinery for winter and spring. While driving south past the Allegheny Forest on Mother's Day, he accidentally hit a little girl standing next to the road. Not seeing anyone else around or knowing what to do, he put her in his car and planned to take her to the hospital. As he was driving this little unconscious girl in the car, she woke up and was seemingly unharmed. As it turns out, he and his wife had lost their only daughter the year before, so the man brought Marjorie to his farm in North Carolina and raised her as their own.
And now the nurse is the... okay. Tell me more.
Now, at the time, the nurse only told Beck this story after he made two promises. One, he could not tell anyone her identity except for Dorothea, whom she wanted to meet. And number two, Beck could only publish her story after she died. By then, however, Dorothea was too fragile and sick to make the trip to meet this, quote, Marjorie. So Dorothea and this possible Marjorie never met, and Beck wasn't able to tell his story until after she passed away.
And this was when? 2000... When was this? Like, could DNA testing have been done?
It was in 2005.
So...
Possibly, but it would have been a stretch. Could it be done now? Sure.
Does she have kids? Does she have...
Well, a lot of people have asked this question.
Okay.
Because let me tell you a little more about what happened.
I am like
I know,
on pins and needles.
Bated breath, right? So upon this woman's death in 2009, Beck released his self-published book entitled Finding Marjorie West in 2010. Now, while Beck insists that the woman he spoke to was Marjorie West, local authorities and family members who have read Beck's, again, self-published book question the validity of its conclusion. Additionally, Beck has never formally brought his findings to authorities, which I do find slightly questionable. Now, was that of this woman's request? That she didn't want her family to be looked at poorly? That she didn't want her parents in some trouble? I don't know. So I went on Amazon to see if I could find this book, and it's listed on Amazon, but it's not currently available. Of note, there are 2 reviews of the book, and one is of particular interest. On February 10th, 2015, someone with the username Spider Girl wrote, 1 star out of 5 stars. Title, Thief, Author. And the body says, I find it interesting that this man is profiting off of my family's tragedy after my grandmother passed away and after she decided to not work with this man after the headache he caused her by making false promises and leading my grandmother on a wild goose chase for years.
So I'm not sure. Is this the original Marjorie's family or the possible Marjorie's family?
Take it for what you will. I don't know.
Because it said after my grandmother's death, which would lead me to believe it's the possible Marjorie's family.
Yeah, I'll read it again. I find it interesting that this man is profiting off of my family's tragedy after my grandmother passed away and after she decided to not work with this man after the headache he caused her by making false promises and leading my grandmother on a wild goose chase for years.
So maybe it is the possible Marjorie, and maybe he was telling her, hey, I can help you find your family, or whatever the promises were.
Right.
But here's the thing. If her mother really did tell her that and she really thought she might be the Marjorie, why didn't she go to her authorities? I'm assuming her mother has passed away, so she can't get in any trouble.
Right.
Like, what stopped her from going?
I would have loved for this to have worked out, but there's just, I mean, at this point, Beck just basically made up a story. You know what I'm saying?
There's no way of knowing that
there's
he
no way
didn't.
of knowing. And again, if they really thought this was the case, why has no one sought DNA in this matter?
Well, that's the thing. If I thought for 2 seconds that I'd been stolen at 4 years old and didn't belong to my family,
and that,
I would be doing my research.
And that my family struggled to find me for decades. I mean, wouldn't you want to know? It's not like you came from, like, you were unwanted.
Right.
You know, you came from quality people, good people. Wouldn't you want to be reconnected with that side of your family?
I mean, I guess maybe if you told me right now that my mom and dad had kidnapped me, and I actually had this other family who I don't know, who I have no connection to, who are my actual parents who have been looking for me for the last, 35 years, maybe I wouldn't want to know, because I wouldn't want to believe that about my parents, that they were capable of doing something like that. So to be like devil's advocate, would I do it anyway? Sure, of course, because, curiosity kills the cat. But
I have 2 to pick from.
Right. But would there be this part of me that would be like, do I really want to know if these parents who I know and love are monsters, quite frankly? Because that's kind of what you'd have to be.
Yeah.
I mean, you hit a kid, and then
No, again, I don't think it started out bad. You accidentally hit her. You're trying to take her to the hospital, but then when she wakes up, you either continue to the hospital to get her checked out, or you take her back to her parents. You don't just continue to, like, abduct her.
Right, and you're not living under a rock. I mean, this is like this huge search, so everybody's looking for this little girl.
Yes.
So, like, no, you kidnapped her.
Yeah, and it's not like it looks like she'd been living out in the woods.
Right.
She's not lost. She's clear with her family.
Yeah, that's not a good person doing that.
Yeah. Now, I don't know. It said that came out of tremendous grief, too, and people do strange things when they're grieving.
That's true.
So I'm not going to throw a stone, But
Well, I already did. I said they weren't good people, but I mean, it wasn't a good thing if it's true. To
Correct.
kidnap somebody else's child
No, absolutely.
is not a good thing.
That was not the right thing to do. No, that's true. When Marjorie disappeared, it made newspapers across the nation, and the story was even told in film reels, which were relatively new at the time. But there were still many people who remain unaware of her disappearance across the country. So it's still possible she somehow made it out in a vehicle and went on to live a full life. If she were still alive, she would have just celebrated her 91st birthday. Now, several of Marjorie's cousins and great nieces have continued to hold the torch for Marjorie. In 2009, one of Dorothea's granddaughters wrote in a blog post, quote, I remember listening to my grandmother tell me stories about Marjorie and the sadness she felt for leaving her sister alone for those few moments. My grandmother held on to her feelings of responsibility until her passing 2 years ago.
See, I hadn't even thought about that, but here you have this poor little girl.
Yeah.
11 years old, right?
Yeah.
Who blames herself because she walked away from her little sister.
I know.
Oh, that's awful.
And unfortunately, that's kind of where we land in the missing persons case of Marjorie West, the, quote, greatest unsolved mystery of the missing.
Okay, so what do you think? What does your gut tell you? Because I know what mine tells me.
I think she probably didn't make it out of the woods.
To me, that seems like the most logical answer. The woods are big, bad, scary places. You got a little tiny 4-year-old. I think you and I have talked before about that show Missing 411, which,
Yeah.
chronicles all these different people who go missing from places like national parks and such. And one of the things they found over and over again is that little kids make it so much further in those first few hours that they go missing, especially in places like the woods and forest. They make it so much farther than adults would ever give them credit for.
Sure.
So, who knows where she could have ended up. And then again, like, with an animal or just the forest,
I like to think she made it out, and I like to think she went on to live a nice life. As we've always said, I'd like to think that they're all reunited now, and that all those questions that everyone had have either been answered or they're so irrelevant. And I think that's kind of where I hang my hat. I mean, Marjorie is still listed under the missing children for missing exploited children.
Wow.
She is still there. You can see her picture there. Her description is still there. It's really sweet. They have the description that I said, and they also have a little asterisk that says spoke with a southern accent, which I don't know how she got living in Pennsylvania. Maybe they had family that lived in a different part of the country, but just breaks my heart.
It's awful.
It is. On that note, though, we always have our branch of hope that kind of helps us end on a positive note, if we could.
And today's case is the branch of hope case.
It is a branch of hope.
Okay,
case.
well that's good.
It's our first episode in August. And in honor of Marjorie West, I have chosen an oldie but a goodie, and the clear and obvious choice, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Absolutely.
Now, the NCMEC, I didn't realize that there was actually an acronym for them, but apparently it is. The NCMEC. And it's currently celebrating its 40th year protecting children from infancy into early adulthood. Did you know that they help youth all the way up to the age of 20?
No, but that makes sense when you think about it. Like, you don't just suddenly, I'm 18 now.
Well,
I need no help.
Well, I knew that was an issue for aging out of the system.
Sure.
Like, you've heard that. So I think that's incredible that they're kind of helping them really get their feet under them and, find gainful employment and quality housing and helping navigate personal relationships. And it's just, what a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Oh, sure. Sure.
The center provides information to help locate children reported missing and to assist physically and sexually abused children. The NCMEC distributes photographs of missing children and accepts tips and information from the public. The center not only specializes in locating missing children, but also identifying the deceased. Posters are created for the cases, and if possible, a forensic facial reconstruction of the subject is created. Now, these, of course, show an estimation of their appearance while they were alive, but some of the reconstructions created by the NCMEC have been regarded as like so state of the art that they actually look like photographs.
Wow.
Like literally these recreations are mistaken for photographs.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is really amazing technology, right?
It's a little scary. Who knows what we're going to be doing in the next few years?
It's a little bit scary, exactly. But all the good things, good positive work, and we want to be here to support it.
Absolutely. I'm super happy to support this organization.
Yeah. So our Branch of Hope, you can donate by going directly to our website where you can find their information. You can also join our Patreon where a portion of your subscription goes directly to this organization. Every month we pick a different nonprofit organization and we give directly to them. So you give to us, you sign up, and then we give our money to them. It's a pretty simple system.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
You get good content and you get to feel good about where your money's going.
Boom. And then if you want to give some extra, say you've got a few extra buckos laying around, you just donate those directly. It's just all good things. We're doing good things. We need to help those around us. We need to support those around us. And this is a way that we're trying to do that. And we're just kind of the middleman here helping to, pass along your good wishes.
We are simply a podcast leading through words and actions. So if you loved this episode, love us, or love what we're doing here at the Branch of Hope Foundation, please like and subscribe and tell someone. And you can forward this episode to a friend who might like it. You can send us an email at thedarkoakpodcast@gmail.com, where we are open to your questions, comments, and anything else you want to share. Tell Stephanie how good she did covering this case today.
Yeah.
And for other ways to connect, you can hop over to thedarkoak.com.
Thanks for joining us, Shiver Seekers. You guys rock.
Bye.
Bye-bye. This episode of The Dark Oak was created, researched, written, recorded, hosted, edited, published, and marketed by Cynthia and Stephanie of Just Us Gals Productions, and made possible by you, our shiver-seeking listener. Special thanks goes to Justice Himes for our incredible artwork and Ryan Crete for our amazing music.